Here are 5 mistakes DIYers make when stripping electrical wires. Just a quick note, I am going to say the word stripper about 39 times in this video, so do your best to keep the giggling to a minimum. I'm talking to you, Beavis. The first mistake is rock and roll. Rock and roll will never die, but your strippers need to listen to more conservative music. Rocking back and forth as you're stripping your wire causes little notches and nicks in your wire that weaken it and increase the likelihood of the wire snapping at that weak spot. I've seen this happen multiple times. Similarly, if you need to twist or roll your wire strippers a little to help cut through the insulation, you'll definitely want to keep that to a minimum. I've seen people spin their wire strippers in circles around the conductor to get a full clean cut. If you have to do that, you're either using the wrong gauge for wire stripping or you need some new sharp wire strippers. Ideally, you should just be able to clamp the wire stripper down on the wire and pull the insulation off. It's not so much of a perfectly clean cut exactly to the conductor every time. It's more like you're breaking a tiny bit of the insulation as you pull it off, and that's actually ideal. The strippers won't typically cut every bit of insulation around the wire, but a good pair of strippers will cut 90 to 95% of it so you can easily pull the mostly loose insulation right off the end. The second mistake is using dull and ineffective wire strippers. Trying to strip wires with older worn out wire strippers like these ones that were clearly forged in Mordor just before the One Ring, kind of like trying to cut a steak with a butter knife. It's frustrating and it might result in such side effects as
changes in behavior, hostility, agitation, depressed mood.
Over time, the blades on your wire strippers can dull, and when that happens, your best bet is just to replace them. Now, technically you can sharpen them somewhat, which renders them effectively useless. A basic set of wire strippers doesn't cost too much, so toss those hand-me-downs and get yourself a pair of newer, sharper wire strippers that can actually do their job properly. Other examples of using the wrong tools for wire stripping include using these, this, and certainly this, even though I was able to get that last one to actually work. Hey, I've been working on something really cool behind the scenes, and it has to do with just what you're watching right now. If you're a homeowner, you should know a little bit about plumbing, a little bit about HVAC, electrical, your drywall, all that good stuff. So if you want to learn a little bit more about what I've been working on and get early access to that, head on over to powerhomeowner.com, enter your email, and I'll keep you posted and in the loop. Thanks so much. Mistake number 3 is simply using the wrong gauge hole when stripping a wire, either because you're using the solid gauge when you should be using the stranded, or vice versa, or you're just not sure what gauge the wire is. Now, to identify what gauge your wire is, wire thickness gauges are your friends, like this one, that you can pick up for under 10 bucks. That said, you can save a few bucks by just using your wire strippers as a wire thickness gauge. To do this, just squeeze them tightly together where they form perfect little circles, and then feed the bare wire through the holes to see which one fits best. I put a few tips together that will help you to more easily identify your wire gauges. Number 1, most wire sets have their gauges printed or embossed on their sheathing, so check there first to see if that's visible. On most Romex cables, it's embossed and not printed, so you may have to hold it up to the light just right to read it. Number 2, speaking of Romex wiring, seeing as how that's what's most common here in modern US homes, it uses the same gauge wire for ground as it does for hot and neutral in certain products. So you may be able to just use your wire strippers to test the gauge of all of the wires by testing the already bare ground wire. I spent some time digging into the specifics on this and discovered that the general rule that Romex abides by is that anything 10 gauge and thinner, so 10, 12, 14 gauge, etc., those use the same gauge wire for ground as they do for the hot and neutral. And anything 8 gauges and thicker, so 8, 6, 4, and down, those use a smaller gauge ground than the hots and neutrals. In the end, your best bet is to check the gauge of your wires before you start stripping anything to verify that you've done it right. Now, the third tip to check for your wire gauge is, while we're on the topic of Romex wiring, back in 01, they started using a color convention to help make it easy to see what gauge you have based on the color of the jacket. The color codes are on screen here, and they use white, yellow, orange, and black to help distinguish the gauge of the wires inside. Remember though that this convention didn't start until 2001, so it's entirely possible that in a home built in the early 2000s or before, these color codes might not apply. Now, our fourth and final tip for identifying wire gauge is that if you're in the US and you're kind of in a pinch, you can use a nickel or a dime here. A 12 gauge wire is about the same thickness as a nickel. A 14 gauge wire is about the same thickness as a dime. Now for our fourth mistake. Stripping too much or too little of the insulation on a wire can cause issues in almost every situation. For example, if we strip too much wire for this terminal screw, we're going to end up with exposed wire sticking out of the back of the receptacle, which increases the likelihood of the ground or another wire touching it, causing a short circuit. This is unfortunately a mistake I have made personally and seen those sparks and felt the effects of this. Not very fun. On the flip side, if you remove too little insulation like this, that decreases the amount of metal-to-metal contact your wire has with the terminal, which increases resistance, potentially leading to more heat and maybe even arcing, and the electrical fire could happen inside the box. To avoid either of these situations, look for a strip gauge on the device that you're connecting your wires to, like this one, on this receptacle, or this one on these Wago 221 lever nuts. Use that as a guide to make sure you've removed the proper amount of insulation and you'll be in good shape. On this topic, automatic wire strippers like these or like these can save a ton of time because not only do they work with a huge range of wires automatically and with no adjustments or work on your part, but you can also set the strip gauge on these to exactly what you need. Just set the stop depth, tighten the set screw if need be, and squeeze the trigger. Easy as pie. I use these types of strippers more than anything else because despite them being a bit on the pricey side, they work so well and so quickly, and they don't ever weaken the wire, which brings us to our final mistake. My goal this year is to hit 1 million subscribers, and I'm really getting close. I hope you can help me out by hitting that subscribe button below. If you don't want to, I totally get that. Hopefully you're getting some use out of this video either way. Thanks so much. Mistake number 5 is cutting around a wire. It's not uncommon to see someone using a blade to cut around a wire or set of wires to remove the insulation or jacket. If you're super careful with this, it can work, but it is way risky, especially if you're stripping the jacket off of Romex, Ethernet cable, or other combination wires like that. When I was finishing my own basement 7 or 8 years ago and it came time to do the finish electrical, I naively decided to remove the sheathing of my Romex by using a utility knife to slice the jacket up close to the back of the box. I then pulled the loose sheathing off and patted myself on the back for a job well done. Well, what I didn't realize at the time was that I was severely weakening the wires inside by scoring them deeply with that knife. Obviously, I wasn't doing this on purpose, but I remember on one light switch in particular, when I went to wire up the switch, one of the hot black wires literally fell off and with almost no pressure on it because I had unknowingly cut right into it earlier when removing the Romex sheathing. If you want to hate your life, try stripping a 3/4 inch long wire tucked all the way into the back of a deep box, and then it's all crammed in there and you're trying to attach a wire nut to it to extend it with a pigtail. It is a mess. It doesn't go well, trust me. If only I knew about Wago lever nuts back in those days, that would have made it much simpler, but still not ideal. So learn from younger Nils's mistakes when you're stripping the sheathing from a cable like this. Use one of these options instead.
Nope, not today.
Option 1, start by carefully cutting with the grain as it were, or in the same direction as the wires just at the end of the sheathed cable. Then open the sheathing and peel up the cable. Then very carefully cut the excess sheathing with either a blade or some wire cutters, being careful not to cut into any of the surrounding conductors. Option 2, use a handy desheathing tool like this Lil Ripper stripper. There's a slitting tooth inside of it that you can insert into the wire and you work it up the wire to remove the sheathing. It even has a jacket cutter for getting rid of the excess jacket up inside the box, not to mention a wire stripper, winged wire nut twister, and a hole for making wire hooks. Pretty handy. My new favorite way to do this is to use a set of box jaw wire strippers like these that are meant for cutting the sheathing right up inside the box. Then all you have to do is pull the whole thing off, the jacket. It comes off in one piece without damaging any of the wires inside. Definitely my favorite way to go. Lastly, you can use some universal wire strippers like these that actually do an incredible job of pulling the sheathing off of any type of multi-wire like Romex, including thicker Romex and even delicate Ethernet cables. Now on the topic of wire strippers, you might be surprised at how many people are unfamiliar with the 8 features built right into their wire strippers. Do you know all 8? Click here to find out. I'm Nils with Learn to DIY. Thanks for watching.